the incremental cost of each additional kid. Because I think people might be really surprised. There was a study done on this, and it shows, I think it's like after 4,
It was
every
after 4,
additional
yeah.
kid costs on average about $1,000 a year. So not a lot.
In an article called The Marginal Cost of Children in the New York Times Archive. By the time you get to kid 3, you have fallen from a cost of around $15,000 a year for one kid to well under $3,000 a year. And so you can see how you get down to like 1,000 extra a year or 800 extra a year when you get like 4, kid number 5. The costs just drop really dramatically.
And the waste that you have when you're having a few kids. Keep in mind, you still need to buy all the shit, whether or not you're having a ton of kids or a few kids. So, the next time you have a kid, it's no baby toys. It's no,
No
no
new clothes.
toddler toys.
No new
toddler
swings or
clothes,
high chairs or
no,
bibs or plates,
or
bottles.
cups or sippers, or every time we buy something for one of our kids, that's being used by like a huge chain of kids after them.
Would you like to know more?
Anyway, hello, Simone. It is wonderful to talk to you today. So we did this video on dinks, right? And we're like, dinks are actually good, right? Because we don't want these people having kids. They're not going to be good parents. Probably not good for the gene pool. So let's march them into their sweet good night all by themselves. Now,
but we got some interesting comments on that video, and one I wanted to do a conversation about, because
I've seen this with other people, right? Like the core point we made in the dink video, or one of the points that we made, is that, while we pity dinks, the people we pity more than dinks is people with only 1 or 2 kids, because it's all of the costs of kids and none of the real benefits of kids. Well, you get some. I mean, you get like the shallow masturbatory feeling of I have a kid that the dinks don't get, and like you get to experience them and spend time with them, which is nice. But you don't get like the genetic or cultural effects, right? You're not really contributing to a solution in a big way, and it's actually harder. We argue, and for us, it's very obviously harder. It is much harder to have fewer kids than more kids.
Totally, and more stressful,
and way more stressful. And we need to talk about why this is the case. And in many ways, we immediately saw it in the question that they're asking us about this. It's like, well, I have 2 kids, but like, I don't know how I'm going to afford college.
I'll read the comments. There were 2 comments that sort of inspired this. So one person said, I have 2 kids, but I think I need to make more money before I go for number 3. My mother-in-law is already very against her daughter having another. So I was waiting till my economic situation changed to go for 3. But should I? I know I want 3 because that's above replacement level. But what are the economics of kid numbers at 3, 4, 5, and crazy numbers like 10? And then someone else also answered, I want more of this conversation too. Currently have 2, but would love 4, but don't want to reduce the quality of life for the children I have, i.e. vacations, private school, etc. This is a very interesting conversation.
Well, that's the answer there. And this is why higher numbers of kids become much easier, because when you get to the higher number of kids, you realize that a lot of these things that you thought was necessary for your kids' quality of life was really more about your own personal vanity than the kids' actual
or societal defaults. Yeah, I think this understanding that private school, for example, is really good for your kids or necessary for your kids, or that like vacations where you fly somewhere are good for your kids or necessary for your kids. Like I remember this, like you had relatives who were making this huge deal about flying their sons to Italy and how they were going to expose them to so much culture, and this was going to be so formative for them. And they were all young teens at that age. So they were like, yeah, they're old enough to really appreciate it culturally. And and they went, and like all they wanted to do was eat at the Hard Rock Cafe every freaking day. They're just like, please just let me eat at the Hard Rock Cafe. Like, I don't really want to be here. Like, they were not enjoying it. They didn't get anything out of it. And so this idea to us that like, oh, well, air travel and like really expensive.
Well, I think what is important to remember was travel became associated with status for a period, because of course, if you can afford to travel, you're wealthier, you're higher status. And so people use it to affirm for themselves their high status, think out really reflecting on whether or not it's this great beneficial thing to them. We talk about life stages, and I think that there are specific life stages where travel brings you a great deal of satisfaction.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, these are also your formative stages of life. So they're also when you're likely to be, I'd say late teens through college, and then like 2 years out of college. Like that range is when you are in from an evolutionary standpoint, that's when you're leaving your family. Of
Mhm.
course, you're going to be biologically rewarded for engaging in exploratory behavior that is both expanding your concept of the world, but also going out and surveying new lands and everything like that. Because
Mhm.
this is, people who had this instinct to go out and do this during that period of their life
Yeah.
would have spread further and had more offspring ultimately than people who didn't. So it makes sense that this is a hard coded segment of our life. But the problem is that it's also around the age when many people are solidifying their identity. So in the same way that during that age, often people will think that kids are gross, like when they're a teenager, they have this like biological instinct. Young kids are gross because they're biologically hard coded to, as a teenager, not be interested in young kids. They're trying to find a partner and start having kids, right? So they see the young kids as gross and they don't want to be overly involved in childcare. That makes perfect sense, right? But they're building their identity then, and so then they work into their identity. Young kids are gross, without realizing that that's like a cycling pre-coded genetic thing for that specific age range.
Mhm.
And it's the same with traveling, and travel during that time, like your gap year, after your young education before you start fully working, or taking a period then to be a digital nomad. I think that makes a lot of sense. It is something I'd encourage our kids to do
Well,
early in
and
their life.
also there are many financially sustainable ways to do that if mommy and daddy can't pay for it. For example, you can get a job abroad, you can get an internship abroad. You like
Yeah, I
and
did lots of ultra low cost backpacking, and everyone
Mhm.
I knew doing it was, lots of hitchhiking. I hitchhiked around South America, I hitchiked around Europe,
Yeah,
and
when I
all the
was
people
13,
who
I stayed in a hostel and volunteered for an environmental center. And like, I didn't have a food stipend or anything, but I spent under $10 a day for sure on like all my expenses, including like having my laundry done for me. It was very luxurious.
but
And,
think about
like
what a trip like that costs with kids, right? You go to the same area, you're not gonna be able to spend, yeah, like, even for your kids, you can't spend $10 a day only, because then you have to get the types of foods that they like and stuff like that.
oh, no, yeah, no. If you're doing this as a family, it's ridiculous. But I think that, that's the thing is, there are lots of things that when you have 0, 1, or 2 kids, you assume you have to do for each child, and they're inherently unsustainable. And there are things also that families never really did in history. And now it's like kind of ridiculous that they did. I mean, okay, so for example, wealthy landed gentry would send sons to travel, but not like every summer. They would maybe send them on a world tour as like a big thing. And by the
And
way,
these are
these
the
kids
ultra wealthy landed
Mhm.
gentry, which I think today is very similar to a gap year, which most people can find a way to make work for their kids.
Exactly, and so that
Um,
that is but that is one trip, and what most people I think have in mind is like, well, every year or every other year, we're all gonna fly to Italy or we're gonna fly to Florida and like stay at a resort or something like that, and it's just one, it doesn't really help anyone, and two, it's not really sustainable.
and
Also,
as I
you
was
and
saying,
I
if you're explaining to like your future kid, we'll
uh-huh.
continue with what you're saying.
Well, you and I have traveled extensively in both very, very rough and also very, very luxurious formats.
Mhm.
We've seen families travel, we've seen individuals travel. No one's having that much fun. Like this is also just not it's not people do it definitely as you're saying. And I think this needs to be emphasized for a self-perception thing, for a social class signaling thing. And I also think also what we're seeing as people who own a business in the travel industry, we're seeing a shift in the travel industry where it's very clear that people can't really afford to travel anymore. Like the unit economics aren't working out. Like I think for a while travel was more heavily subsidized and people were able to go on what seemed like very luxurious travel trips for low costs.
Mhm.
And those days have come to an end post pandemic. Flights cost a lot more and people are now still trying to make this vision work, but they're getting on less and less comfortable flights. They're suffering more and more on their trips because they're getting worse services. They can't afford as much. And then they're just getting really super disappointed. And we're seeing this throughout the travel industry.
And this comes to this point that we're just going to keep emphasizing in this is the thing that you realize as you have more kids, the thing that makes it so much easier once you get well above 2 kids is you accept that, oh, I don't need to do all the things I thought I
Mhm.
needed to do. It forces you to, there's this thing in fighting games, actually. So we're talking about it like, okay, so there's these fighting game communities, right? Like for like Street Fighters or something like that, where they'll play games against each other. And there's these moves that you can learn, like Honda doing the whoa, 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 whoa thing just over and over and over again, where you're spamming a certain move. And
Yeah.
this can work really well up to a certain level of opponent or difficulty. But as soon as you get to an opponent that knows how to beat this, like a certain level of difficulty opponent, people who were overly spamming these simplistic moves to win end up not being able to develop as players, because there is such a huge gap between where they are right at that moment and the opponent who they were facing was, right? Like when they get out of this difficulty trap. So they're now way below everyone who's at like a similar ELO rating to them, which is like the difficulty rating. This is kind of similar with kids. You need to reach either you reach a point in which you're kicked out of this, stupid way of having kids that our society does it today, and you're like, oh, this is unsustainable. I need to find a different cultural way of relating to kids. But when you go into kids, and this is what's really interesting, like while kid number 1 was hard for us, kid number 2 was actually fairly easy. Kid number 3 was fairly easy. And I think that if we had incrementally been adapting with every kid, we would have been like the guy who was spamming that simple move just because we had the money to afford it at the time. Where instead we're like, okay, you like starting with kid number 2, every kid we're going to be raising as if we were raising 7 kids. Like, how do we economically make this work if we're raising 7 kids? And so we make very, very, very different economic decisions around everything we're doing with kids. And these economic decisions and social decisions in terms of how we're interacting with them and everything like that, like how do I make this economically viable, is where we're getting these big advantages in terms of it being very, very, very much easier. And so the core thing that you keep seeing is, how do I have kids without sacrificing X or Y or Z or D? And it's like, well, you should have sacrificed those things long ago. They don't matter as much as you think they matter. Like, really.
Or they're harmful, like private school, for example. That another example given in the comment. Some
Would
of
you want your
the
kid convinced to hate you? Like, send them to private school if you're a rich person.
Yeah,
because
we've heard
hate you.
multiple parents who are well resourced who sent their kids to private school because they were able to. They had the privilege of doing it, and often they only had one kid. Though many of them, also had many kids, and they just had more like the money to pay for it. They now hate private school. They think it was,
Yeah,
alienated their children from them and robbed them of their culture and made their kids hate them. Like, private school is not necessarily this really good solution for your kids.
I don't
Also,
know
I
a
went to
single.
public school and it was great. It was, I would not have done any better in a private school.
Yeah, and I don't know. I went to private school. I went to boarding school. It doesn't add that much. I don't know a single person in the last 5 years that I've met. Like, I know some older parents who would have said, "Yeah, private school is great for my kids." I don't know anyone recently who said that private school was good for their kids. I know a
Yeah.
lot of people complaining about private school. I've heard a lot of horror stories about what's happened to people's kids at private schools recently. But if you are sending your kids to private school, you need to like recontextualize what you're really sending them to
Well,
these
no,
days.
so I do think that a lot of people, especially in this community, are thinking about like sending their kids to classical schools because they don't want them to go to a progressive school. So they're sending them to private schools that are Catholic schools, or like
Well, no,
there's
they're
some
making
form
a
of classical
mistake. They're sending them
education.
to Catholic schools that they don't know. They haven't talked to people whose kids have gone to Catholic schools recently. These are just as progressive as everywhere else. These
There are
institutions.
some genuinely religiously conservative schools, and they can be pricey. But I mean, I think we also make the argument that like a good homeschooling program, and we're also designing one for our own kids that hopefully will be made available to other families this year too. You
Super
can,
cheap.
yeah, super cheap. You can have elite affordable education. You just have to be resourceful. And I think a lot of the, again, it's about normalizing. No, of course, you're not going to send your kid to private school because, one, you don't need to, and what you can do at home as a family is better. No, you're not going to fly to travel, but you can take car trips. You can you can absolutely travel places as a family, and that's very normal. And like the point I was making earlier about like a world tour is that like yeah, but these, even these super super wealthy kids at that time weren't traveling every single year. That even the wealthiest did not normalize things like this. They
And there
didn't. They
are
didn't.
ways that you can make travel work for your family, even today, if you want to travel every year. You get in your car or your van or your
Mhm.
converted bus, depending on how many kids you have, and you go to the woods, you go to local things. And this
Well, one
matters in
thing
terms
you created, we should link to this in the description, your where to live document, where you created a document on an optimal places to live if you live in the United States and you want to have a large family. And one of the big things that you factored in there was where are places where you can live where in a car with your family, because obviously flying is really expensive when you have a lot of kids. Would you be able to travel to the most meaningful, cool destinations? So, it's affordable to take trips that still feel really special, where you go to major cities or major sites or theme parks or whatever it might be. So I think that's
this
also an
is
important factor.
after you secure a partner. So obviously, I do think that cities are a high utility for securing
They
partners.
are. They are.
After you secure a partner and you're looking to settle down, you start having kids, do check out this document and then move to rural Pennsylvania because it is the best. I mean, look, I can easily, from where we are here, go take a trip to DC, go take, see the nation's capital, see all the museums, go take a trip to Manhattan, see all of that, go to Boston, see where the Tea Party happened, everything like that, or go to the beach. I can go to Jersey Shore. I can go gambling in Atlantic City. I can,
Mhm.
I can see most of America's like major cultural centers very, very easily. Oh, I want to go to another country, just drive up to Canada. I want to go to a theme park, oh, Horseshoe Park.
And we find
There,
this uniquely notable because you grew up in Texas, at least when you were pretty young, and I grew up in California, and like you can't really drive to that many places when you live in.
can't do anything. Yeah, it's terrible. I did not enjoy it at all. I remember, when I was at boarding school in New England, when we'd be driving for a little bit, people were like, "Oh, we crossed the state border," and I'd be like, "You did what?" You got to understand, you a Texan. Saying you crossed the state border is like saying we just entered like deep space. Like what?
Yeah, and Californians, no, I don't care to hear that you drove to Vegas or Tahoe. Like, no, that doesn't impress me. When like we have to drive at much shorter distances to get to either gambling or resorts or amazing camping and nature and wildlife
And
that
Big
is
Sur is
close by.
shit. Let me tell you what. Sorry, how did this video come up shitting on everywhere but Pennsylvania? But yeah, Big Sur. People in San Francisco, they're like, "Oh, I went to." You got no animals there. Like it's weird. Like when I go to Big Sur, it feels like I have entered an area that has just undergone some sort of like ecological catastrophe, where like somehow all of the insects and birds and animals died because it is weirdly quiet. This is just
I
true
like it.
throughout
I like it. I know you
California.
really like buggy rainforests. That's not really my thing. I'm a fan of Big Sur. I grew up around it, but like
Well, I mean,
anyway,
you
just in
you
terms
go to
of
the forest just
variety.
behind our house, like the ecological diversity you have here, just the birds like around our house, like nothing on this in California. I don't understand. My guess is what's happening in California is the trees have some sort of defense mechanism that's like uniquely good. I think it might be the redwood forest against
Yeah,
some
it could be a redwoods thing.
and that because you don't have insects, you don't have birds, and because you don't have that, you don't have like anything else that you would have in a normal large ecosystem. But it is like a uniquely sad like growing up in Texas, like I get to California and I'm like, where are the animals? Like this is the woods, it's trees and deer. Like where's everything else? But anyway, and I do think that there's some other places. Obviously we stand where we live because we're happy with the place, and you're running for office here, so you got to talk about how great it is.
But there are other really, I think, common things that, a lot of people expect they have to do as parents. It would be insanely expensive if you did. And one thing that did come up in the comments too was childcare. Like childcare is just so expensive. And when I was watching a video recently on why dink couples didn't have kids, one of the women interviewed said, "Oh yeah, I have this friend who just bemoaned the fact that she realized that the amount she takes home and take home pay from her job equals the amount that she would be paying in childcare if she had a kid." And yeah, childcare is unsustainably expensive. And after a certain number of kids, like we used childcare when we had two kids because kind of we could, and it was like much easier to not have to work that out. And then after three, and having three in childcare for like 6 months, like all of our savings were gone. So we're
Yeah,
like,
no,
this
we're
is
like, yeah, screw it.
unsustainable.
We're figuring out another solution. And that's the thing with more kids, right? It's
Uh-huh.
that more kids force you to find other actually sustainable solutions.
Yeah.
Now we have found a solution that costs us maybe half what we were paying in childcare before for the 3 kids.
Mhm.
Is infinitely better for our kids because it's a friendly neighbor who we help with stuff and help a bit financially, and then who takes care of the kids and who the kids like more, right? Like, we had built this horrible situation where we were treating childcare as either a school or an individual financial thing where it's like, we're paying you for X many hours. And now we're treating it in the way people historically treated it, as a community solution,
Mhm.
because more kids forces you to find these more out of the box solutions that are actually much closer to the way people historically did things.
Yeah, I
And
think a
that's
lot
about
of it's the question of what is your life going to be about? Like, is your life going to be about conforming with mainstream societal ideals of like, this is how you do these certain rituals? Or is your life going to be about your family and raising a successful family? And even when it comes to kid development, I think that it's underrated the if we could put a dollar amount on the value that a child gets by having siblings, that they get to play a role in raising, the responsibility that gives them, the maturity that gives them, I feel like that it on its own is worth at least 25% of the cost of an elite private school every single year in terms of the maturity and responsibility that it gives to a kid in a
Well,
positive and constructive context too.
and keep in mind, another advantage you have when you have a lot of kids is, when we're at 8, 9 kids or something like that, then you're getting to a situation where we don't even need the neighbors to help take care of the kids. Then the kids are playing the daycare role as well. So
If they
it
want
costs.
to. We wanna make it we were discussing this yesterday. We wanna make this totally, like, opt-in. Like, we would pay them for tutoring and childcare services if they wanted to do it, and if they didn't, we wouldn't force it. We don't believe in forced parentification, but I think it's also, like, a great
I
opportunity.
believe in forced parentification. I think that you don't want that for our kids, and I understand why we wouldn't do that with our kids, but I don't think it's like a bad thing.
Well, and yeah, I mean, I don't believe in coercion, and I don't think you really can coerce it, but
No,
yeah,
you
I
don't
mean
wanna force a kid into a role like that doesn't want to be in a role like that, but if you
exactly.
raise a kid well and you have parental instincts, your kids will have parental instincts. Our kids are very nice to each other, like, we're
Yeah.
surprised by it.
Yeah.
So I totally get that. Now, another thing that somebody mentioned in one of these that I want to bring up, and I'm not gonna look this up, I'll look this up afterwards and then add it when I'm doing the editing, is the incremental cost of each additional kid, because I think people might be really surprised. There was a study done on this, and it shows, I think it's like after 4,
It was
every
after 4,
additional
yeah.
kid costs on average about $1,000 a year. So not a lot.
Sadly, I was not able to find this study I was thinking of. I know it was done at one time, and it was around 1,000 a year once you get up to 4. And it makes sense when I looked at another study I found, which found the numbers for kid 1 was 14,460 a year, kid 2 was 8,540 a year, and kid 3 was 2,880 a year. And this was in an article called The Marginal Cost of Children in the New York Times Archive. So this is even, fairly progressive publication, which is admitting this. By the time you get to kid 3, you have fallen from a cost of around $15,000 a year for one kid to well under $3,000 a year. And so you can see how you get down to like 1,000 extra a year or 800 extra a year when you get like 4, kid number 5. The costs just drop really dramatically.
And the waste that you have when you're having a few kids. Keep in
Mhm.
mind, you still need to buy all the shit, whether or not you're having a ton of kids or a few kids.
Mhm.
So, the next time you have a kid, it's no baby toys. It's no,
No
no
new
no
clothes,
toddler toys,
no
no
new
toddler
swings or
clothes,
high chairs or
no
bibs or plates,
or
bottles.
cups or sippers, or every time we buy something for one of our kids, that's being used by like a huge chain of kids after them.
Mhm.
Like, the wastefulness of buying a bottle or a shoe for a toddler that they can literally only wear until they what?
When we
Like, I
really
can't
work on
imagine a
buying,
parent,
like, forever toys, like,
like,
we now take inspiration from and this is I think this is I'm so excited to have learned this. School like, not school, public libraries often have, like, toy sections for kids, and those toy sections are usually populated with the most durable, but also popular toys. that can survive many, many, many children constantly playing with them and totally abusing them for many years. So that's where we got the idea of like wooden toy sets and all these other things that like clearly are durable, clearly have staying power. Our kids love playing with them, and you can always have the kids play test them at a public library and know if they like them. So like, yeah, we don't have to buy that again for our kids, which is amazing.
Yeah, well, it feels so wasteful when you get something like this and it's for one kid or
Oh
two kids,
gosh,
right?
painful.
Like you are like these toys interest them for how long? Like literally, I don't know, like not that long for a lot of toys. But if
Yeah,
they're interesting 5 kids, 6 kids, you get this feeling like, oh, that was a really worthwhile economic investment for my family.
totally. Yeah.
And
No,
and
it's and like, what are other crazy things? Oh, like when we go out to eat and we see parents ordering kids meals for their kids, which they subsequently do not eat. That
why would you
stresses
do
me
that?
out so
Why would
much.
you ever take your kids to a restaurant? Like, I don't get it. Why
Well,
would
so
you
this
ever
is the thing
go to
is,
a restaurant?
one, you don't need to pay for your kids, and two, you don't need to pay for Ozempic because you just give your kids a little bit off your plate, and then so
No,
it's
it's like one, okay, yeah. So if you're going to a restaurant, you can have your kids eat off your plate or something like that. But it's like, do these people not know like YouTube exists? Like, if you have a decent quality spouse, like myself or my wife, we always take the time to, if we go to a restaurant, the only reason I go to restaurants today is to learn new dishes. And when I mean learn a new dish, is I look at the dish they made, and if I like it, then I learn to make it myself, and then I make it for myself. There is no reason to, as an adult, be going to restaurant. What are you doing? Like, you can go to YouTube, learn to make the dish that was made at the restaurant, right? And then tweak it to your personal taste and make it with all high quality ingredients without cutting all the corners that restaurants are always cutting. And you're going to get a dramatically cheaper, dramatically higher quality food. Like,
yeah.
what are you doing? And this is the type of thing where it's like, historically before kids, we would go out to eat pretty frequently, right? And kids force you to learn to make these decisions when you have a big family that end up being much more economically nicer, much more even hedonistically nicer. Like the food I'm eating now is better than the food I was eating when I would go to restaurants all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you keep seeing this, is that our society has trapped us in what I call easy hedonism. And the problem is that easy hedonism sucks so much more than hard hedonism.
Well, and I think the other thing is that people need to recognize just how completely out of touch with reality most standard expectations around children really are. Like even when you look at movies from past time periods, like,
You want to go on
and I don't
your 16 candles
yeah, I was
rant?
just
Come
watching
on.
16 Candles last night and I was like, "Oh my gosh, this is a family of 4 and they are financially reasonable about what they do with their lives." Like they there's a wedding that takes place in the movie for one of the older siblings in a family, and all the grandparents come to town, but they're like literally sleeping in the kids' bedrooms of the family house. They're not like putting them up in hotels or anything because they are financially reasonable. Home Alone, there's not a nanny for every child like moving about the house. They don't have au pairs or anyone helping them out. This is, this is a family that is literally traveling with how many kids? Like 10, 14? It was some insane
Yeah.
number of kids.
Well, and
And
today they'd be like, oh, you can't travel with that many kids without an au pair. What are you doing? 15
yeah.
kids and no au pair?
Although they were clearly, I mean, when you look at their house, they're like insanely wealthy, and they also were flying to like Paris, and then in like the second movie, Miami, with all those kids. They're insane. But yeah, I mean, even when you look in the past, you see little things of like, yeah, no, yeah, kids don't need this much stuff, and we're not being reasonable. So I think that the question to ask yourself, if you want more kids, here's the thing: do not have more kids if financially it is going to put you in a dangerous situation where you cannot maintain housing or food or your job. Like do not put yourself in a situation where you are um mentally going to suffer a ton because of the stress and the like you're going to lose your health insurance or things like that, like where like literally you're being destabilized. Although I should say that most states have resources for parents who find themselves in a low income level.
Talk about our resource list.
Yes. So on pronatalist.org, if you go to our services section, then scroll down a little bit, it links to a parent resources page where we list, at least for the United States to start, if you want us to try to do your nation, let me know and we can,
Or
hire a
do it
consultant.
yourself and we'll add it to the list for other parents.
Totally. But we have a guide to federal resources for parents in the United States, as well as state-based resources for parents in the United States. The vast majority of them are based on income limits. But if you are low income, it is amazing what the state will provide. I mean, everything from, healthcare to food assistance to housing assistance to all sorts of other things, even access. There are more education savings accounts programs for low income families now than there are just for general families. So there's a lot that you can get for support. But I still I don't want to encourage people to have kids if they can't afford to pay for them all by themselves. So I feel like if that's the
This
problem.
is more aimed at the person who's like, how do I pay for private school for all my kids? It's like you
Right.
don't.
And that's you just don't. Yeah,
That's
just
it's easy.
don't. Yeah. So no, you're not gonna fly
Same as college.
to
Like
Europe.
we're building our education system specifically because we do not plan to send our kids to college, and I wanted something better.
Well,
I mean,
specifically because we do not plan to pay to send our kids to college. If they want to
Mhm.
go to college, they have to find a way to either through their own businesses or through scholarships or grants pay their own way through college. And we plan to set them up to have that be an easy option for them if they want it. But yeah, I mean that's the thing is no, you will not be going out. No, you will not be flying internationally with your children. No, you will
One
not
of the
be.
things we should probably build for our foundation is one of those things that can help a kid. What's the word where they become separated from their parents?
Oh, to become emancipated.
Because that can really help with college loans and stuff like that if you're part of a large family.
Oh, with financial aid. Okay, that's a good project for us to work on. But I do remember before we had kids thinking it was going to be a lot worse and that oh man, this is going to be so tough and also expecting that we were going to need those things. We were going to need a bunch of nannies and night nurses and remember after my first attempt to get overnight care when we had a newborn, I was like, wait, this is really stupid. No, and ever
Why
since
have I done this? This
I
was a
do all of the
terrible idea.
overnight care. I do all of the daycare for newborns because that's really easy for me. And then you take care of all the toddlers and everyone older. And it's seamless. There's a lot of things that you think you need that you really, really, really don't. And I will admit there are some luxuries I've been exposed to and ever since being exposed to them, living without them sucks.
There is one first class flights,
Yes.
but you cannot afford. Is there any other?
No, and see, that's it. There's nothing else where I'm like, oh man, my life is so much worse now.
And the only
And
reason we even would need to take you on a first class flight is because of the freaking conferences we speak at
Yeah,
because
and
of
it's
pronatalism.
yeah, and I would rather not travel at all. So really, it's not even something I should be regretting because I really don't want to travel in the first place. So my life really isn't worse at all.
And I
And
love
so
when people are like, well, what about my friends? I'm not going to get to see my friends anymore. It's like, do you not understand? Friends are pretty shitty. Kids, so much better than friends. Like the parents stop interacting with you when they have kids, not because they don't have time always. Some of the time it's because they realize that these veneers of relationships they had formed with other people were so much less deep than the relationships that actually matter in life.
yeah, and this is it is something that we constantly struggle with that everyone's like, yeah, but what about love and the deep bonds that I form with my friends? And we're just and this is not to say that there are people that we really care about a lot that, to us, they are family and they're not related to us by blood. These are just people that we care deeply about and we will vouch for them and we'll put our names on the line for them and whatever. Right. But I don't know,
But I don't need to burden myself caring about them all the time and seeing them and visiting them and going out for drinks. I don't understand how bars same as. I'm gonna be honest. We live in a rural area, and this is something I often talk about. How you have to go to these bars, you have to drive to them. How are you doing that?
yeah,
Then you have
suburban
to drive
bars do
home.
not make sense. Suburban and rural bars are very strange. It is,
What is
that's
going?
true.
What? And the drinks cost 8 times if you just. Ugh. Anyway, I love you, Simone.
I
Have
love
a
you too.
wonderful day, and I hope this video has been, to some extent, freeing to some people, but other people just be like, no, I can't do it. I won't give up anything. And it's like, okay, well, then you shouldn't have more kids because you're
But
needing
don't
this.
think of it as giving things up. Think of it as recontextualizing life and embracing frankly more.
This is why you're running for office.
Well, but also, like, it's so odd because you and I are so materialistic, and everything we do is very much driven by like capitalist philosophy, and it rubs many people the wrong way. But we're also like, like the money stuff doesn't matter. The luxury stuff really isn't what we're in this for. So I don't know. Like, I would say that even as very materialistic, capitalist friendly people, like, this is just not something that's worth it. Like, you're not gonna be happier living this luxurious life. And we see this as people who've experienced both extremes in different contexts.
I've experienced extreme luxury in my life, and people who live life in extreme luxury are not happy people generally.
They're
This
really
is something
not.
broadly. They are really not happy people. And when I see ultra wealthy people who have a lot of kids, they are not forced to make these changes to the way they raise their kids, which leads to them being actually, in my experience, much less happy than lower income people who have a lot of kids. Because those are the people
Yeah.
who are like, okay, how do I actually figure out childcare? How do I
Yeah, like,
actually
I would say,
care
like,
for
we'll
this
say
kid?
roughly middle income kids, like families that are large, have the best kid outcomes. And if anything, both, I mean, okay, so I would say, yeah, like low income kids have the worst headwinds, like the worst. But then second after them is super wealthy kids
Oh yeah,
because of
yeah, yeah.
just all the messed up stuff that they're dealing with. And then the best off are not even upper middle class, but like middle class, where like there is literally not the option to have many indulgences in life. Like, those do the very best because they learn how to handle things for themselves. It's so funny. Martha Stewart, my hero, my patron saint, spent her entire career, once she became famous, trying to hide the fact that she came from a poor Polish family. But the thing that made her such an amazing person, and the thing that made her capable of turning homemaking and domesticity into this branded luxury experience, was the fact that she actually had to make everything from scratch, that she actually had to sew clothes, that they actually had to have all these, like, they had to fix everything themselves, and reupholster furniture, and make all their own meals, and not go out for dinner and stuff. So, like, it is these people who ultimately create amazing outcomes. So, just, yeah.
I love you, Simone,
I
and
love you
I
too.
really enjoyed this conversation. And I'm just so fortunate to be married to somebody who's willing to make these changes. One of the things that I think scares me the most, when I think about our kids and when I look at
Mm.
people out there today, is they marry someone who tells them that they're down for these
Oh,
sacrifices, that they're
yeah.
down for these life changes, and then they do not make them. They
The old
get to keep
switcheroo.
anniversary. They refuse to actually care for the kids. They keep like full-time live-in staff, and they say this is too much for me. And I've seen this even within my own family, and it is repulsive. It is the highest failure, a human who committed to handling this can make. And
Yeah, and it's really rough
and
because typically it's the women who do this, and they
oh,
have, like, 100% all the control over, like, whether or not they're gonna have kids. And a man can't be like, "Oh, no, pregnancy is not that hard," because they literally can't do it, and so
and
they
they, and they
can't.
and then you go to people about this, right? And I wish they could see kids the way we do. They kids exist before they're born, right? And so when a person says, "Well, yeah, but if I have another kid, I won't be able to travel every year," it's like, do your trips to like the Caribbean, are they like, if your future kid, like two timelines, you have to in one timeline explain to your future kid that the trips to the Caribbean were just more important than their life? Like, do you actually think you're like a decent human being? Like, oh no, it's that I had to take my other kids out of private school, or I couldn't pay for college for all my kids. And you go to that future kid and you're like, little Timmy, I'm sorry, but your life just was not as important as sending these other kids
Well,
to
and
this
think about this, actually.
documentation factory.
We wouldn't have American heroes like Benjamin Franklin were it not for parental budgetary constraints.
Mhm.
So Benjamin Franklin's father wanted to, as he put it in his biography, tithe him to the church as one of the youngest kids. He was like, okay, finally, I'm willing to just give away one of my kids to the church. So his plan originally was to pay for Benjamin Franklin's private school so that he could go into the clergy and be properly educated to
Mhm.
serve God traditionally through the church. Ran out of money. And so Benjamin Franklin had to get a job And it was that point at which his life and career began. If he had ended up
Job at like
going
12, by the way, you know.
yeah, starting at age 12, totally. But like, imagine if his father had enough money to continue paying for private school, to send him to the church. Benjamin Franklin may have been, you know, a great church luminary or something like that, but he certainly would not have been the philosophical inventuous what's the word for someone who
Inventor?
invents things?
Inventor.
And yeah, but like someone an adjective describing someone who is inclined to make inventions.
Ingenious? Inventorious?
Innovative.
Innovative, yes.
Yes. Yeah, he wouldn't have become this entrepreneurial, innovative, politically influential figure that he was. I mean, he played a key role in the formation of the early United States. So again, like, you know, some kind of hardship, some kind of constraint has to be given in order to give someone the opportunity to thrive. So anyway, I know, we gotta get going. Do you want to do curry bricks tonight?
Curry bricks? Oh, you want to mean the Japanese curry bricks?
Yeah, the Japanese curry
Oh,
with
yeah,
the
yeah. You're gonna do that with the slow cooked steak?
yeah.
Love that idea. And this is the type of thing, you know, when you have a big family, you can use a slow cook a big thing of steak. You know, you get it at BJ's. It stays very well in the fridge after that. So then you dole it out. And once you've slow cooked the steak, there's lots of things you can do to create these really high quality meals. So I am so excited for this, Simone. And I
Good
love
night.
you to death.
I love you too, Malcolm.